Hey guys, so in today's video I wanted to make a slip dress and I thought I'll tag you along with me through the process. So first I'm starting off with my two pattern pieces at the front and the back, and I'm thinking of changing the armhole, the way the armhole goes on the front piece. Now I'm gonna try to insert a photo of the dress I have in mind. So I wanted to sort of go like that. Having this, both the waistlines on the same line and my new armhole line comes here, that means I'm gonna have to lower my back pattern and bring it down to here. So technically I have to move it till here, cut this back piece till here, if I choose to go with this new zone. Another choice I can do is, because I'm unsure of how this will look, I can keep it, and because I can always remove, but I can't add fabric once I cut it. So I'm thinking I keep it as is, and later on, if I want, I can make any tweaks. So this is the fabric I'm going to be using for the slip dress. It's this beautiful navy blue. I really hope it turns out as good as I'm imagining it to. So let's get started. So first we find the grain line and then fold it like that. So I'm going to take the unfold part and put it on the fold of the fabric. So once you have your pattern where you want it to be, you start pinning it down from this side first. So once I have it pinned down, I'm going to trace out the pattern. So when I'm actually sewing, I can see exactly where I should be sewing, where the lines are, so it doesn't become like smaller or bigger. I find that easier, so that's just my preference. Another thing is that I want the bottom of the dress to be flowy. So I'm gonna add 4.5 centimeters from the side plus sewing allowance. So now I'm going to decide from where I want it to start flowing and how to make a smooth transition, and that's entirely up to you. Just make sure it's as smooth as possible for a nicer look. So before I start cutting this piece, I usually like to also pin down the fabric of the other piece, just to make sure that I have enough fabric before I actually start cutting. So that's what I'm gonna do. That was the front piece, and now we're gonna work on the back. I'm gonna measure where I started the flow of the front piece, so I can start at the exact same spot for the back piece in order for it to be, the same, so it looks good. To do that, I'm gonna measure from the hip line of the front piece down to where I started making the dress flow, and it's the same starting point from the hip line on the back piece, so I'm gonna measure down from there too. So let's start cutting. Last thing I do before I start sewing, I use these tracing papers and put them under the fabric, and using my tracing wheel, I mark the lines so it copies onto the other side. I have my two pieces ready. I'm gonna start hand sewing them together so I can try it on and see if I want to change anything about it, whether I want to make it tighter or looser or any of that. I still have to cut straps for the dress and its linings, but I will do that once I've settled on the pattern. So after I finished hand sewing the garment, I tried it on and I decided that I want to make it a little tighter from here to just cinch it a little bit down towards the waistline, just to give it a bit of shape. I hand sewed that, tried it on, and I liked it. So now I'm going to cut the excess fabric and we can move on to machine sewing after. I also would like to shorten the length of the dress. So now that we sewed the sides together, the next thing we have to do is cut our straps and our lining. So I measured how long I want my straps to be from the back side to the front. It's 46 centimeters plus seam allowance. And I want mine to be 2 centimeters wide. So cut 2 centimeters plus seam allowance. Starting off with the strap, there's this piece of garment, which is exactly the length I need it to be. So I'm gonna start by measuring 48 centimeters and then 2 centimeters from the bottom and 2 centimeters from the top. Width is 4 centimeters. So here I'm just cutting out a lining piece, and I'm doing that by mimicking the shape of the dress onto a piece of fabric and cutting it out at 5 centimeters length plus seam allowance, so 7 centimeters. And yeah. Next, I'm gonna sew the straps at 2 centimeters seam allowance and then turn them over. Now you're gonna have to start sewing the lining onto the dress and make sure you sandwich the strap in between the lining and the dress wherever you want it to be. I personally like to put it at the edges of the top. Now the next step is very important in making sure that the lining does not stick out when you're wearing your dress. So to do that, you have to take the seam allowance from underneath the lining and sew it to the lining at 1 to 2 millimeters seam allowance. And if that's too complicated, I can make my next video on how to do that. Here I'm just overlocking all the unfinished edges to get a cleaner look. And after that, we can move on to hemming the dress. For this dress, I decided to do a narrow hem because I feel like it gives a more flattering finish. And if you would like, I can make a tutorial on how it's done. And here's the finished look. I hope you guys enjoyed watching.